The station never slept. Its wide halls glowed in soft colors that shifted on a careful cycle, meant to keep workers calm and travelers oriented. For Salith, those lights were the only way to measure days. When the pale blue returned after long stretches of amber and white, she knew another cycle had passed. How many cycles had she been here? She had stopped counting years ago. She sat near the transparent wall of her assigned chamber, hands folded, posture straight. The restraint band around her wrist was thin and smooth, more a symbol than a tool. It hummed softly, tied into the station's legal network. It did not hurt. It did not tighten. It simply existed, reminding her that she was not free to leave. Her species believed in patience. On her homeworld, the long lives of her people taught them that waiting was not suffering. Rivers changed course slowly. Mountains wore down grain by grain. Endurance was considered a virtue. So when she had signed the contract presented in a language that was technically translated but deeply unclear, she had trusted that things would resolve in time. She had believed the station authorities when they said her service would end when the debt was fulfilled. But the debt never seemed to shrink. Every task completed revealed new fees, housing costs, nutrient provisions, administrative processing. The system was clean, polite, and endless. No one raised their voice. No one threatened her. They simply reminded her that the numbers still favored the station. Salith was not beaten. She was not starved. She was simply kept. She watched travelers pass beyond the transparent wall. Many species crossed the main corridor, each cycle tall ones, small ones, scaled, furred, shimmering. Most never looked at her. To them, she was part of the station. Like a terminal or a display, humans arrived quietly. They were newer to this region of space, their ships practical rather than elegant. They moved differently than most species. Faster, less graceful. Their eyes lingered on things others ignored. Evan Hale was one of them. He worked maintenance, which meant he was everywhere and nowhere at once. He fixed climate units, recalibrated doors, crawled through access shafts that most species avoided. His uniform was slightly worn, his hair never quite neat. He talked to himself sometimes while working, a habit no one had bothered to correct. The first time Evan noticed Salith, he was adjusting a power conduit near her chamber. He glanced up, expecting to see an empty space or a storage unit. Instead, he saw her eyes. They were large, reflective, and very aware. He froze for half a second, then straightened and gave a small, awkward wave, as if greeting a neighbor through a window. Hi, he said out loud, though he wasn't sure she could hear through the barrier. Salith tilted her head slightly. No one spoke to her unless they needed something. Speech directed at her without purpose was rare. She raised her hand slowly and mirrored the small wave. Evans stared at the restraint band on her wrist. It did not look like a prison device. It looked like paperwork made solid. He finished his work quickly, but his attention kept drifting back to her. When he left, he glanced over his shoulder more than once. The next cycle, he returned. This time, he stopped deliberately in front of her chamber. He checked a handheld device, pretending to review station data, then cleared his throat. "Hey," he said, a little louder. "I'm Evan. I work maintenance." Salith stepped closer to the barrier. "I am Salith," she replied. Her voice was calm, musical, shaped by a language that favored soft tones. "I maintain biological archives." Evan blinked. "Archives?" She nodded. "I assist researchers by recalling environmental histories. My species retains detailed memory across generations." "That's actually really impressive," Evan said honestly. She inclined her head. Praise was not something she had heard in a long time. He hesitated, then gestured vaguely at the chamber. "So, how long have you been here?" Salith paused. The question felt strange. Time was rarely discussed. "Several contract cycles," she said carefully. Evan frowned. "That's not really an answer." She looked at the lights beyond the corridor. "I do not know the number," she admitted. That answer bothered him more than he expected. Over the following cycles, Evan found reasons to pass by. Sometimes he fixed things that did not truly need fixing. Sometimes he just stood and talked. He asked about her world. She told him about wide green plains and slow-moving skies, about cities grown instead of built. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions others never had. Eventually, he asked about the contract. "It is lawful," Salith said. "The station holds my service until the debt is complete. And how much is left?" She looked down at her wristband. "The amount changes." Evan's jaw tightened. He had seen this kind of thing before. In small ways. Fees that fed on themselves. Systems that worked because no one challenged them. "But you didn't do anything wrong," he said. Salith looked at him gently. "Wrong is not relevant," she replied. "Only terms." That night, Evan went back to his quarters and didn't sleep. Humans, as a rule, did not accept things simply because they were written down. It was one of the reasons other species found them exhausting. They questioned rules. They asked who benefited. They pulled at loose threads. By the next cycle, Evan had started reading interspecies labor codes during his breaks. The language was dense, full of references and clauses that folded into one another. It was clearly designed for specialists, not workers. Still, Evan kept reading. He learned that Salith's situation was common and rarely contested. The system did not see her as suffering, and so it did not see a problem. Everything was balanced on technical compliance, not fairness. Each discovery made his unease grow. When he returned to her chamber, his voice was different, focused. "Salith," he said, "did anyone explain the contract to you before you signed it?" She considered the memory. "They summarized," she said. "They said it was standard. And did you have a legal advocate?" She shook her head. "It was not required." Evan let out a slow breath. "Yeah, that tracks." Salith watched him carefully. "Why does this concern you?" she asked. He looked almost embarrassed. "Because it shouldn't be normal," he said. "And because you deserve better than, that's just how it works." The words settled into her like warmth. For the first time in many cycles, Salith allowed herself to imagine something beyond the chamber. Not freedom exactly, she had trained herself not to think of that but change. As Evan walked away, already lost in thought, Salith returned to her place near the transparent wall. The lights shifted again, marking another cycle. But this time, the passing of time felt different. Something had begun to move. Not the station, not the contract, but the quiet certainty that things did not have to remain the same forever. Evan did not become a hero overnight. He became tired first. Each cycle, he worked his normal shifts, fixing air recyclers and misaligned doors, answering routine calls. And each cycle, when his work was done, he sat in common areas or quiet corners with his datapad, reading laws written by species who assumed everyone thought the same way they did. Salith watched the change from behind the transparent wall. When Evan came to speak with her now, his eyes were focused, his movements sharper. He asked careful questions, the kind that showed he was building something in his mind. "Your contract," he said one cycle. "Does it say you can refuse tasks?" Salith reviewed the memory. "It says I may decline duties that threaten my biological integrity." "So nothing about consent," Evan muttered. "I am not familiar with that term in this context," she replied. He looked at her, then smiled sadly. "Yeah, that's kind of the problem." Other workers noticed him lingering near her chamber. Some found it odd. Others did not care. To most species on the station, this was simply how things worked. Contracts were sacred. Systems were neutral. Questioning them was seen as unnecessary effort. One trader, a tall avian species with metallic feathers, stopped Evan in the corridor. "You are investing excessive attention in a settled matter," the trader said calmly. "It's not settled," Evan replied. "It is lawful. That doesn't mean it's right." The trader blinked slowly. "Those are the same thing." Evan shook his head. "Not to humans." Word spread quietly that a human maintenance worker was studying interspecies labor law. Some found it amusing. Humans were known for passion but not patience. The assumption was that Evan would give up. He did not. Salith, for her part, struggled with something she had not felt in many years. Uncertainty mixed with hope. Her species taught that hope without certainty was dangerous. It led to disappointment, to emotional imbalance. She had survived by accepting her situation as fixed, but Evan's presence disrupted that balance. He spoke of possibilities, not promises, of questions that had never been asked, of clauses hidden behind assumptions. "You see," he explained once, pacing slightly as he spoke. "The system assumes that if something is legal, then someone must have agreed fairly. But humans don't stop there. We ask whether the agreement made sense to everyone involved." "That seems inefficient," Salith said gently. Evan laughed. "It is, but it's also how things change." He showed her parts of the contract on his datapad, translated into simpler terms. For the first time, Salith saw how many sections depended on interpretation rather than clear limits. "This part," Evan said, pointing, "says your service continues until the debt is resolved. But it never defines what counts as fair resolution." "That is standard," Salith replied. "Standard doesn't mean permanent," Evan said. "It just means no one pushed back." Salith absorbed this quietly. Her people had endured hardship by flowing around it, like water around stone. Humans, she was learning, preferred to move the stone. The station council chamber was a place of order and tradition. Representatives from many species met there to resolve disputes, guided by precedent and process. Evan had never been inside before. When he submitted a formal inquiry, not even a petition yet, the system flagged it as unusual. An automated message responded, "Clarify standing." Evan stared at the words. Standing meant authority. It meant asking who he was to raise such a question. He went to Salith's chamber that cycle, visibly frustrated. "They're asking why I'm involved," he said. "Like caring needs permission." Salith considered this. "You are not bound by my contract," she said. "Your involvement is optional." "That doesn't sit right with me," Evan replied. "If something's broken, and you can fix it, walking away is a choice too." He took a breath, then smiled. "I think I know how to answer them." Instead of claiming authority, Evan claimed responsibility. In his reply, he wrote that humans recognized moral interest as a form of standing. That systems existed to serve sentient beings, not the other way around. That ignoring harm because it was subtle did not make it disappear. The council did not respond immediately. Cycles passed. Salith returned to her routines, assisting researchers, organizing biological data, answering questions. Yet something had changed. She noticed the station more now, the way others avoided looking at restraint bands, the way assumptions shaped behavior. One cycle, a junior researcher asked her, "Do you enjoy your work?" Salith paused. No one had ever asked that. "I find it meaningful," she said truthfully. "That's good," the researcher replied, smiling. "At least you're happy." Salith did not correct her. When Evan arrived later, she told him about the exchange. "That's another thing humans do," Evan said quietly. "We confuse survival with happiness." Salith studied him. "You are unhappy with this system," she observed. "Yeah," he admitted. "Because it treats people like problems to manage, instead of lives to respect." The council's response arrived without ceremony. Inquiry accepted. Preliminary review scheduled. Evan read the message twice, then laughed in disbelief. "They didn't say no," he said. "That's huge." Salith felt a strange tightness in her chest. "What does this mean?" she asked. "It means they're willing to look," Evan replied. "And once humans get someone to look closely, things tend to change." Preparation began. Evan gathered data, examples, case comparisons. He spoke with other humans on the station, some of whom had encountered similar systems elsewhere. They shared stories, not of cruelty, but of neglect, of laws that never considered the individual. One human legal analyst reviewed Evan's notes and whistled softly. "You're not wrong," she said. "You're just poking a very old structure." "Does that bother you?" Evan asked. She smiled. "Not at all. Old structures need maintenance too." Salith watched from a distance as Evan worked himself thin. She worried in the quiet way. Her people worried. Without panic but with depth. "One cycle," she said. "You do not benefit from this." Evan looked up from his data pad. "Sure I do." She tilted her head. "How?" "I get to live with myself," he replied simply. The words stayed with her. As the review cycle approached, the atmosphere around her chamber shifted. More glances, more whispers. The idea that a contract could be questioned unsettled many. Some species saw humans as dangerous not because they were violent, but because they were disruptive. They did not accept the comfort of tradition when tradition caused quiet harm. The cycle before the review, Evan stood in front of Salith's chamber longer than usual. "Whatever happens," he said, "I want you to know this wasn't a mistake. You matter." Salith placed her hand against the transparent barrier. Slowly, Evan mirrored the gesture. Palm to palm, separated by a thin field. "My people believe fate is written in layers," she said. "The deepest layers change the slowest." Evan smiled. "Humans are good at scratching the surface." The lights shifted again, marking another cycle. But now, time did not feel endless. It felt like it was moving toward something. The council chamber was larger than Evan expected. It was not designed to impress. It was designed to last. Smooth, stone-like materials formed wide tiers, each shaped to accommodate different bodies. Light came from above, soft and even, leaving no shadows where things could hide. Sound traveled clearly but gently, so no voice needed to rise. Salith had never been inside the chamber before. She stood beside Evan at the designated position, her restraint band still active, still humming quietly. The band allowed attendance, but not movement beyond approved zones. Even now, the system assumed she was an object of discussion, not a participant. Evan noticed. He noticed everything. Representatives began to arrive, settling into their places. Some glanced at Salith with mild curiosity. Others avoided looking at her at all. A few studied Evan with interest, as if trying to understand why a human maintenance worker was standing here instead of a legal specialist. The central moderator, a tall being with translucent skin and slow movements, activated the session. "This review concerns a long-term service contract held by Station Authority," the moderator said. "Inquiry initiated by human Evan Hale. Standing has been provisionally accepted. The purpose of this session is clarification." Clarification. The word sounded harmless. Evan knew better. He took a breath and stepped forward. "My name is Evan Hale," he said. "I'm here because I believe this contract functions in a way that removes meaningful choice from one party, even though it appears lawful." A low ripple of murmurs passed through the chamber. One representative spoke. "The contract was signed voluntarily." "Yes," Evan replied, "but voluntariness depends on understanding and alternatives." Salith was presented with a complex agreement in a crisis situation, without independent guidance, and with no realistic option to refuse. "That is common practice," another voice said. "That doesn't make it fair," Evan answered calmly. Salith listened, her hands folded. Her heart beat steadily, but something inside her felt exposed. She had spent years being discussed indirectly. Now, she was being spoken about in her presence. The moderator turned toward her. "Salith of the Alaran," it said. "You may speak if you wish." The chamber became very quiet. Salith had not prepared for this moment. Her people believed words carried weight and should be used carefully. She looked at Evan. He did not nod or gesture. He simply waited. That was important. "I was told the contract was standard," Salith said. Her voice carried clearly. "I was told my service would end when my debt was complete. I accepted because I believed the system was balanced." "And do you still believe that?" the moderator asked. Salith paused. This was the dangerous part. Honesty could change things, or it could close doors forever. "I believe the system was not designed to consider someone like me," she said. "It is not cruel. It is indifferent." The word seemed to echo. Several representatives shifted. Indifference was harder to defend than intent. Evan continued. The issue isn't that rules were broken, he said. It's that the rules assume fairness without checking for it. Humans have learned, sometimes the hard way, that systems can be legal and still wrong. A representative from a long-established trade species responded, "If every individual case redefines the system, stability collapses." Evan nodded. "We don't redefine everything. We test it. Stability that cannot be tested isn't stable. It's fragile." That caused another ripple. The moderator raised a limb. "This review will focus on one point," it said. "Whether the contract allows for indefinite service through cumulative fees." Evan smiled slightly. This was the opening he needed. He displayed a projection. Clear numbers appeared, simplified, translated into common terms. "These fees are not fixed," Evan said. "They adjust automatically. Housing costs increase with station upgrades. Administrative fees grow with each review cycle. Salith's work reduces the debt, but the debt grows faster than it can be paid. That is economic reality," someone said. "It's a loop," Evan replied. "And loops remove exit." Silence followed. The moderator processed the data. "The contract does not specify an upper limit," it said slowly. "No," Evan agreed. "It assumes one will never be needed." Salith felt something loosen inside her chest. For years, she had felt trapped without understanding why. Now the shape of the trap was visible. Another representative spoke, more cautiously. "If this interpretation stands, it could affect many agreements." Evan met their gaze. "Yes," he said. "It could." The hearing paused for deliberation. Salith and Evan were guided to a quiet waiting area. The transparent barrier here was thinner, meant for short stays. Evan leaned back against the wall and let out a long breath. "You did great," he said. "I was afraid," Salith admitted. "That means it mattered." They waited in silence for a time. Salith watched Evan's hands. They shook slightly, though his face was calm. Humans carried tension differently than her people. They moved forward, even when unsure. When the council reconvened, the mood had shifted. The moderator spoke again. "The review has identified a structural imbalance," it said. "While no violation occurred, the outcome contradicts the council's mandate to preserve sentient autonomy." Salith's breath caught. "The contract will be amended," the moderator continued. "An endpoint must be defined. Additionally, service continuation requires periodic reaffirmation of consent." The words took a moment to land. Evan's eyes widened. "The existing debt," the moderator said, "will be recalculated under the amended structure." Salith felt the restraint band on her wrist change. The hum softened, shifted, as if something deep within the system had been rewritten. She looked down. The display showed a number she had never seen before. Finite. The hearing ended quietly. There was no celebration, no announcement. Just a procedural note entered into the station's records. But the effect was immediate. When Salith returned to her chamber, the door did not close behind her automatically. It remained open, waiting for instruction. She stood there, unsure. Evan watched her, smiling gently. "Take your time," he said. She stepped out into the corridor. The floor felt the same. The air smelled the same. The lights continued their steady cycle. And yet, everything was different. Other workers noticed. Some stared openly at the now inactive restraint band. Others looked away, uncomfortable with the reminder that change was possible. That cycle, Salith walked the station freely for the first time in years. She did not rush. Her people believed first moments should be honored slowly. She visited observation windows. She watched ships arrive and depart. She listened to conversations not meant for her. The station felt larger now. Later, she found Evan in a maintenance bay, quietly recalibrating a panel that did not truly need fixing. "They changed the system," she said. "They adjusted it," Evan replied. "Systems don't like sudden moves." She smiled, a small, careful expression. "You were right," she said. "Words can break chains." Evan shrugged. "Only if someone listens." Salith considered the future. The debt would take time to finish. She was still bound by choice and agreement. But now, the choice was real. My people will want to know how this happened, she said. Evan chuckled. Tell them a human got curious. As the cycle lights shifted again, Salith felt something she had not felt since leaving her home world. Not freedom yet, but the clear path toward it. Freedom did not arrive with noise. There were no alarms, no announcements, no crowds gathering to watch. When Salith's debt finally reached zero, the system simply updated itself. The restraint band around her wrist released with a soft click and dimmed into an inert ring. It did not fall away. It remained as a record, a reminder of what had been and what had ended. Salith stood in her chamber and waited. For many cycles, the door had been something she passed through only with permission. Now, it remained open, unguarded, responsive only to her presence. She stepped forward, paused, and then stepped back once, just to be certain the choice was hers. It was. She took a slow breath and walked into the corridor. The station felt different when nothing was holding her in place. Every direction was possible. Every path belonged to her. She did not rush. Her people believed that important moments should be greeted with calm, so the memory would settle correctly. She made her way to an observation deck she had seen many times but never been allowed to visit. The stars beyond the wide window stretched endlessly, bright and quiet. Ships moved between them like careful thoughts. Evan found her there. He did not announce himself. He simply stood nearby, hands in his pockets, looking out at the same view. You're really free, he said after a moment. Yes, Salith replied. I believe so. Evan smiled. Good. They stood in silence for a while. Humans were better at quiet than most species believed. Evan had learned when to speak and when not to. What will you do now? He asked eventually. Salith considered the question. For so long, the future had been a vague concept, something to endure rather than shape. I will travel, she said. I will see what became of my world. I will share what I have learned. Think anyone will believe you? Evan asked lightly. She turned to him. They will believe the results. The council's decision did not remain isolated for long. Within cycles, similar contracts across the station were flagged for review. Not all were changed, but many were adjusted. Limits were defined. Consent was clarified. The station did not collapse. Trade did not stop. Life continued. But something subtle had shifted. Other species began to look at humans differently. Not as conquerors or disruptors, but as something more unsettling. They noticed that humans did not wait for permission to care. Reports spread beyond the station. On distant trade hubs and research outposts, questions were asked. Had their systems truly been fair, or merely convenient? Had they mistaken stability for justice? Salith prepared for departure quietly. She gathered personal items that had once seemed meaningless because she did not believe she would ever leave. Data crystals from her work, notes written in her own language, a small memory seed from her home world, preserved carefully through the years. When she went to finalize her departure clearance, the clerk looked at her and hesitated. Your status has changed, the clerk said. Yes, Salith replied. The clerk nodded slowly. Safe travels. No title. No condition. Just a wish. Evan helped her arrange transport. He worked through the system with the same steady patience he used for broken machinery. You don't have to leave right away, he said once. You could stay. Take a role here. People respect you now. Salith smiled. Respect is valuable, she said. But so is movement. He accepted that. On the cycle of her departure, a small group gathered near the docking bay. Some were researchers she had worked with. Others were humans who had heard her story and wanted to see the outcome for themselves. No one made a speech. Salith turned to Evan before boarding. My people believe debts are not always burdens, she said. Some are gifts that teach us who we are. Evan tilted his head. I like that. You gave me more than freedom, she continued. You showed me that patience does not mean silence. He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable with praise. You did the hard part, he said. You spoke. The ship's ramp began to rise. As Salith took her place inside, she felt no fear. only curiosity. When the ship departed, Evan watched until it vanished into the light between stars. Then he turned and went back to work. Life on the station returned to normal, but the definition of normal had changed. Evan continued his maintenance rounds. He fixed doors. He recalibrated systems. He asked questions when something felt wrong. People began to expect that from humans. Once, a station administrator sighed and said, "You humans complicate things." Evan smiled. "Things are already complicated. We just notice." Cycles later, Salith's message arrived. It was addressed not only to Evan, but to the station council and any who wished to listen. She spoke of her return home, of how her people listened quietly as she described contracts without endings and systems that mistook endurance for consent, of how they debated, slowly but seriously, what responsibility meant in a shared galaxy. She spoke of humans. "Humans do not move faster than others," she said in the message. "They move differently. Where others adapt to systems, humans adapt systems to life. This makes them inconvenient. It also makes them necessary." The message spread. Some dismissed it, others saved it. Evan read it once, then returned to his tasks. He did not seek recognition. He never had. Yet, when new workers arrived on the station, they were told certain things. They were told where to find resources, how to navigate trade laws, and they were told this: if something feels wrong, ask a human. Not because humans were in charge, but because humans would listen, and then refused to stop asking why. And somewhere among the stars, Salith traveled freely, carrying with her a quiet truth the galaxy was only beginning to understand. Humanity's greatest strength was not force, or fear, or control. It was the simple, stubborn belief that every life mattered and that no system was too old to change.